So, my guest today is a founder and CEO of the charity Access the Dales, Debbie North. So, hello, Debbie,
Hi,
and
Anne. Hi,
welcome.
it's lovely to meet you.
It's great to meet you too, and welcome to There's a Walk for That. So, I'd love it if you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your story and how the charity Access the Dales came about.
Yeah, so as you've introduced me, I'm Debbie North. I am at the moment, I'm the Disability Ambassador for the Countryside, which is a 3-year post. I'm coming towards the end of that, which has been really interesting, working with government ministers of how we, what the situation is now regarding accessibility for people with disabilities into the countryside, and really where we want to go from here. Um, so there is a lot happening actually at national level, but at the moment it all seems to be talk, talk and very little action. So it's dependent on groups that are lobbying to say that we want change for access to the countryside, by looking at sort of the man-made boundaries and barriers such as styles, gates, width of paths, etc. But also one of the biggest barriers is the cost of all-terrain wheelchairs. And anybody that's heard me speak before will know that I use the analogy of wheelchairs being my shoes. So my everyday manual wheelchair is my comfy black flat shoes that I wear on my pumps, that I wear, that I feel comfortable in, that I don't really notice that I've got them on because they cause me no blisters. And that's really good for everyday use. But like a walker who would not go out in their everyday shoes into the hills, they would wear either, a firm walking shoe. Um, there are different all-terrain wheelchairs that are the different gradients of footwear for the outdoors. So there are shoes that are a good, comfortable, sturdy all-terrain wheelchair, right up to the Four Seasons hiking boots, which is the one that I love using is the terrain hopper that gets me to the tops of mountains and takes me on expeditions that I want to do. But they are so, so expensive. And also transporting them around. Not everybody's got the capacity to have a vehicle that can take an all-terrain wheelchair in. So there are lots of different barriers. So I started blogging back in 2011 when I became a wheelchair user. Prior to that, I was a very keen hill walker. And when I couldn't walk, it had effect on not just myself, but on my family as well. My husband stopped walking because he said it wasn't the same without his walking partner. And that's how we started researching about all-terrain wheelchairs. Never even heard of them. I was coming to terms with using the manual wheelchair. Um, never knew about all-terrain wheelchairs that had the capacity to go over rougher terrain. But when I did start discovering that they were out there, it was the price of them, the inaccessibility to be able to move them about. And so I blogged about it, and I called the blog Access the Dales. But then in 2021, devastation hit family again when my husband passed away with a very aggressive form of cancer. And we decided that we'd change my blog into a charity, in as a legacy to Andy, so that Andy would always be remembered that he was the one who liked to go out into the hills. And the reason we set up the charity is the impact that having wheelchairs in different locations for different people to use not only impacted on the person with the disability, but once again, the companions, the carers, the family, the friends, we're all going out together in a group. So the charity, we expect it to be a small charity, just simply based in the Yorkshire Dales, which was like our home, that where we love to wander on the hills. But we've expanded since then. So in the sort of 3 years of infancy that the charity has been going, we've managed to secure funding for different things. One is to expand into the Forest of Bowland National Landscape, and we're now working with Nidderdale. So we've gone from beyond the Yorkshire Dales, and we're spreading out sort of this part of the country, Nidderdale, Forest of Bowland, with all-terrain wheelchairs in different locations, different types of all-terrain wheelchairs, which is probably our unique selling point, because there are charities around the country that are doing something similar, like countryside mobility, like outdoor mobility, but they tend to use one type of wheelchair, whereas we're using different wheelchairs for different terrains, for different abilities, and say that is our unique point. But one of the things that we are really, really enjoying doing and getting grants for is getting people who have not really ever accessed the countryside for one reason or another, whether it's that fear of the unknown, that they don't know where they can go, they don't know what the reception is going to be like when they get there. And so we've got lots of funding to hold people's hands and to show them what is possible with a little bit of planning, with a little bit of guts and courage to make that first step. So we've had groups with autism out with us. We've taken groups of people with visual impairment. We've got a group of hearing impairment coming out onto the Settle Carlisle train. We've done festivals for showing what is possible. We've got a lovely festival coming up in September that is purely for children with disabilities and their families, based at Gisborne Forest in Lancashire. And that is a celebration of, with just a little bit of careful planning, people that are providing activities for outdoors, such as bushcraft, such as charcoal drawing, such as storytelling in the woods, mini bug hunts, orienteering, but just with a little bit more thought around disabled access to those kind of events, how we can make it more inclusive and eventually get more and more people outdoors. As you can tell, Harriet, I'm very passionate about it.
When you go to your website, it's so clear where all the buggies are that you can use, which I think is incredible. The fact that someone can just go to a location and book a buggy and use that buggy. And then you have all your different walks listed very clearly, and everything that anyone needs to know about the walks. And for our listeners, just to let you know, these walks, I mean, some of them, yes, look more gentle, if you might call it, but others are they're serious. You're right out in the hills, you're out in nature, in raw nature.
Absolutely.
It's not some park. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a park, but I just want people to know that this is getting disabled people really out into places where you would think would be inaccessible. And your motto, I think, is to make the inaccessible accessible.
Accessible, absolutely. And that's been it since sort of 2011, when I lost the ability to go hill walking, and that's been a mission that we're taking forward. And this is why we've got the different grades of wheelchairs. So we are finding that people are going to, say, Aithgarth for a start, because people know Aithgarth Falls, they know Malham Cove. They are national iconic places to go to. I'm borrowing the wheelchairs there, probably for the first time. It's not a hard walk. It's as you've used the word, a gentle stroll. But for some, that is the first time that they've been outside. So then they might then book somewhere a little bit more remote, because we are not all about honeypot places. We've got a fantastic hub up on the foothills of the Howgills, and you can go out there on the tramper and not meet a soul. And it's rugged, and it's just amazing. I mean, the landscape, the scenery is 360 degrees. But that is like really getting outdoors. We've got one in Nate Bay, which is above the fells, just over Kirby Stephen, heading towards Swaledale. And again, you can go out there in a train hopper and never meet anybody, and have the solitude, the tranquility of a landscape that would otherwise be inaccessible to people with mobility issues. Spreading out into the Forest of Bowland, we've got some fantastic walks on the Whitewell estate, which belongs to the King. And, there's one walk there that's called To the Queen's View, and that comes about from when the late Queen Elizabeth II visited her estate, and she went to this particular spot, granted in a Land Rover, and declared it was her favourite view of her estate, and hence it's been called the Queen's View. And we now have a mobility scooter there that you can go to the Queen's View. And with a lot of the farms diversifying from working with livestock to putting on educational visits and farm visits, over in the Forest of Bowland, we've got quite a few now over private lands, which would again be inaccessible to members of public, because it's not a public right of way. But they have allowed us to put machines there to go along their land, and again, you're seeing views that you wouldn't normally see. You wouldn't get to see, even as an able-bodied walker, you wouldn't get to see, because they are private. It's private land, but we have got access to that private land, and it's just absolutely amazing. I mean, one farm has built an accessible bird hide over their wading fields, so you can go in there with the mobility scooter and spend hours just filming them, taking shots of them, or just watching the birds. So it's that sense of it is possible.
There's so many disabilities
Absolutely.
that prevent people from accessing the countryside, and some of them are visible and some of them are invisible. But when someone has something that's stopping them getting out, that affects not only them, it affects their family, their friends. It's a whole network of people who now also can't do these things together. So the impact is huge. So what I'd like to ask you is, what do you think the positive impact is for people with disabilities and their loved ones, their families and friends? What is this bringing them?
People talk about vitamin nature and the positive impacts of being outdoors. I've suffered mental health issues with losing my husband. I still suffer. I have really good days, and then other days it's very, very dark, and I feel lonely. I feel angry that he's gone. I go through so many emotions. When I am outdoors, I feel uplifted. I can feel that sense of, yeah, I can get to the end of today, even if I'm just spending 10 minutes outside in the garden, outside in green space. It uplifts me. I know it generates positivity.
I know before you were a wheelchair user, you were able-bodied, and you and Andy used to walk a lot in the Dales, and as a couple. And I just wonder if you can tell us what that meant to you personally and together, you know, what it meant for you individually, but also what it brought to your partnership.
Oh, it was the love of the outdoors was a bond. It was, um, there were times we both had busy lives. Andy was a deputy head teacher in Calderdale. I was head. So we both had, full on jobs, but the weekends were our time with our children, uh, or just as a couple, or even with friends. Um, and there were times when we were out on the fells and we didn't speak to each other. It was that comfortable silence. He was wrapped up in his thoughts, I was wrapped up in my thoughts. So you could have that solitude. You could sit on a mountain top by yourself. One of the daft things we used to do is get in the car at 3 o'clock in the morning so we could be on top of a mountain for the sunrise. And it was that closeness because we had something common that we shared together. Um, it just cemented our relationship. Outdoors was us. We were,
Mm.
we got married in our walking boots. I had a beautiful dress on with my mucky old walking boots on because that was what brought us together. Um, and now I go onto the hills and, I go to our favourite spots and I chat with him. And probably people think I'm absolutely doodle because I'll be chatting away and talking and sharing my problems. And it was amazing because, when you're outdoors, you have that space to think. Your brain suddenly becomes more creative. You don't, you're not locked into the the right and wrong decisions. And an analogy is like a tap. Creativity indoors and it drips. You've got to drip. Outdoors, the tap is full on, and you just have that space to talk through things, come up with different ideas. Some are crazy ideas, but eventually you get round to the right answer. And so you can come back refreshed, head on for the next week of trials and tribulations at work. You've got that clear headspace so that you can then get on and make the right decisions for yourself, for whoever you're working with, for yourselves as a couple. And yeah, we had a deep love and we shared that love. And that was what was special about our relationship, um, outdoors and being there. Yeah, something that I haven't mentioned is that I've just finished, and the manuscript is with Bloomsbury now, but I was commissioned to write a book for Bloomsbury Press, and it's taken me a good 18 months to do it. But basically, I've been going around the country from top of Scotland down to Cornwall, meeting people who've used the outdoors to overcome some form of adversity. And I managed to get 30 people that would share their stories. And each person is just an everyday person that you might pass on the street. They're not celebrities, they are lovely human beings that are just the most beautiful people I've ever had the honor to come across. And some have been suffering through suicide. I met Mike, who was one of the three dads walking. Mike Palmer, whose daughter committed suicide during COVID, and he's used the outdoors to raise the awareness of teenage suicides. But even in the sadness of his story, what was uplifting was how being outdoors has helped him come through such a tragic time of his life, and the companionship of the other two partners of the Three Dads Walking. I've met a guy who's gone through gender transition, who has used the outdoors for him to come for realization of who he is and the acceptance of who he is. I met this absolutely remarkable lady called Marika down in Herefordshire who is blind, but she's a very keen walker, and she, with her guide Angela, who occasionally tells her this about the lay of the land, but Marika has got such confidence in holding on to Angela that very often instructions are not needed. But we'd only just set off on the Hergus Ridge, and she said, "Stop, stop." And I'm like, "What on earth's happening?" She said, "Listen." And I couldn't hear a thing. And I said, I'm sorry, Marika, but what am I missing? And she said, "The skylarks have gone." And it was the fact that it was not necessarily the sound she was hearing, it was the sounds that she wasn't hearing that was remarkable. And I said, when we got to a beauty spot, I said, "I'm closing my eyes and imagining what you can see." And she said, "Well, open them, because I've never seen them." She said, "So don't imagine what I've seen, because I haven't." She said, "But now close your eyes and feel what I can feel, smell what I can smell, hear what I can hear, taste what I could hear." And suddenly my senses opened up to, my goodness, I can taste fresh air. I can taste the atmosphere. I can taste the warmth of the day. And since meeting Marika, she has just opened up my whole a whole magical world out there, that it's not just about getting the paces in and getting the steps in. And today I've walked 8 miles. Just that taking in and taking time to absorb the countryside around you, the space around you. So she's had a huge impact on my life, is meeting Marika. And say that there's 30 just absolutely wonderful people that I've met through the research and the interviews of this book. You know, life is a rich tapestry, and it's there for the taking. If you want to have a rich, fulfilled life, then there are the opportunities. But we have to share the information, we have to share the knowledge, so that it's available for everybody, and not just for the privileged few who know how to find out about it and are able to to get that information for themselves.
So, what is the title of your book?
It is called, I Understand, Access Adventure.
Nice. So, for people who may be listening, who may have mobility issues or any kind of mental health issues that might be preventing them from getting out there, or perhaps their carers are not sure how, I'd love to take them out, but how do I do that? What's your advice?
Visit Access the Dales website, of course. visit our website. Take the plunge. Do something local to start with. Just visiting your local park and getting some space. When you have done that, you'll realize the benefits of being outdoors, and then you'll be able to maybe go a little bit further, maybe take a bus ride to somewhere, go on the canal and enjoy a boat ride on the canal, go to your seaside and enjoy a walk on the prom. Just do it. Be brave and take the plunge and do it. You will feel the benefits immediately.